Head teachers Nikki Rosewell from Grange Middle School in Harrow and Eileen Ross from Herbert Morrison Primary in South London have adopted very different approaches to behaviour management.
Who's naughty?
Eileen uses assertive discipline, with happy and sad faces leading to cumulative rewards and punishments.
That's right, Zuba.
While Nikki has introduced transactional analysis, which tries to develop children's emotional literacy and get at the roots of their bad behaviour.
Which ego state were you in there when you...
We showed our programmes to Nikki and Eileen, together with Andy Miller, who trains educational psychologists at Nottingham University, and Giles Barrow, a consultant who favours the transactional approach.
Feeling that he was the victim.
Well, I thought both schools were really courageous for engaging in this project. That was my first thing. I found both pieces really useful insights into both approaches. And what I found most important was that there was a real congruity between what people believed about children and about teachers and about learning and what they were doing.
Both of you have been really angry and you were fighting. So can you go and stand where you think you were when you were fighting? Both of you. Okay. Actually go and stand on it, Zubair, that's all right.
I'm very sympathetic to TA as a psychotherapeutic approach with adults. I did wonder, though, I think along with you, when I started watching the film, I thought that the terminology grated a bit to me, hearing this kind of language in a classroom.
But I don't think there's anything that says you have to use that language. It's
no, well, I don't
the
think
theory.
you need to.
And I mean, it's one of the things that we talked about, not just with the ego states, but when we were in the process of training, about giving teachers a language to be able to use, being able to say to the child, I can see it's really hard for you at the moment because you would like to be doing that. We're trying to give an understanding of where the behaviour comes from, the sorts of choices that we have, how we can build successful relationships. And we may not see that whilst children are at Grange.
See, I see this as two different systems. I see the assertive discipline as a tool to empower teachers to actually have their needs met within the classroom, which is maximising learning time for all children. And I see the TA side as another aspect to a behavioural management system, which is conflict resolution. So that when children do argue, when they do fight, when they are those 5% that nobody can ever reach, when you get that, you're teaching them a different way of solving their problems. And I think I picked up with you said your year 7 wouldn't have responded to a happy side or a sad side, but they would have responded to an assertive teacher who said, no, this is what we're going to learn today, this is what we're going to, this is how we're going to do it.
Okay, by the count of 3, everybody listening. 1, well done, Imran and Amador. 2, 3.
I think there's a problem with assertive discipline type approaches in particular as a type of behavioural approach, and that is to do with that right-hand side of the list on the board. The danger is that negative comments put up in public generate the emotion of shame, and lots of things happen as a result of shame. One thing that might happen is kids go quiet, so we might think the behaviour policy is working well. In fact, what we've done is sown shame.
When I changed the seating, then it meant that they had nowhere else to focus but me.
I understand that. And no, we don't want to shame them. We don't want to humiliate them at all. But on the other hand, everybody needs to see that the child has made a choice during that lesson, and that's what happens when you make that choice. And so that's where the fairness and the consistency is applied, and that's where the children understand. And I agree with you. We used to have good and bad. Well, they did when I first came here. But it's happy and sad.
About that, yeah.
I changed it to sad because it is sad. If somebody feels that they have to throw a book across the room because they don't want to do that.
And it's a very good modification, I think, you know, going away from bad, which is clearly full of moral judgment, to sad, isn't it?
I just wondered about that. I really did wonder. We're using two quite powerful words there, referring to two quite powerful emotions, one of happy or joy, and also one of sad. And I thought it might be a bit more straighter if it was actually right and wrong. Because essentially that's what behavioural approaches are about.
I don't think that's right either. I don't think that's right either, right and wrong.
Why wouldn't you think it was right?
Far too heavily moralistic.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely, and I'm suggesting that no approach isn't moralistic.
All right, well,
it
if
is
you-
underwritten
if you're going down
by
the route-
some beliefs about the way the world works.
OK, well, that's fine. If you're going down the route of trying to get the terminology right in Eileen's setup, what about appropriate for the classroom, not appropriate for the classroom? Nothing to do with the morality of the person. It's just we're in a rather strange place here. There are 20 or 30 small people and one large person in here. Doesn't happen anywhere else. The large person's in charge. The small people, by and large, got to do what they're told. No one else in the world works like this. In here, this is how it works.
And I was thinking there could be some confusion about using happy and sad when those things go on. Who's happy and who's sad?
Yeah.
Where's that coming from? Who's determining that those are the, if you like, the feelings or the emotions that underpin it? Because someone's made a judgment there, and I'm not saying a judgment shouldn't be made, but someone has made a judgment there about defining what happens when a child does throw a book at an inappropriate time.
There are some problems with behavioural approaches in general, I think. Whatever package they come in terms of assertive discipline or even golden time and many other variations. And one of the problems is the evidence is now stacking up that extrinsic motivation, in other words, doing something so you'll get something from somebody else, only takes kids so far and doesn't make them intrinsically motivated to work at school, to enjoy school, to extend themselves. And I think what you're trying to get at is an intrinsic motivation whereby people are aware, young people are aware of themselves, and by being aware of themselves, therefore are more at home in school and are more at ease with themselves in school and therefore are more likely to learn.
I agree with what you've said, but I think that with your citizenship, your PSHE, your racism, your bullying, your whole school ethos, the whole culture of the school adds to the behaviour management. You're talking about educating the whole child with an exciting and invigorating curriculum that gives them the self-esteem to want to do well.
The finding occurs over and over and over again that with behavioural approaches, behaviour doesn't generalise, as psychologists call it. In other words, you can get it right in this room and you can't necessarily expect it to be right in the next room or out in the playground or somewhere else outside the school. And that's the problem about the extrinsic and the intrinsic motivation that I was talking about before.
I don't know whether you remember, you said to me about the way the children behave in school and the way you see them behaving out of school.
Yes.
And you said that there is a difference between that. My hope is that there isn't a difference.
I think what you're after is to have an intrinsic motivation that carries around with the child rather than seems to be, if you like, more environmentally contained in a particular classroom or a particular school.
Yes, but I don't want you to think that I just want children to behave in my class for my
don't think
teachers
that.
so that they learn and they can do what they like outside.
No, I don't think
that's not my aim. That's not the vision we have for our children here. 4 ticks on the happy side. Well done, Cor. That's 3 you've had. Well done. Mummy will be pleased, won't she?
Thank you.
There was a very touching moment in your school when the little girl came into you and she'd got her 3 or 4 or whatever, and you gave her a certificate and you said your mum's going to be pleased with that. And you, I mean, that's not about extrinsic motivation. That's not about ticks on charts or whatever. That's much more human and connected emotionally, I thought. And that's the essential bit with behavioural approaches, that sometimes people look at behavioural approaches and say, this is terrible, it's bribery, you're giving kids things. And of course there are some behavioural approaches that use money. So at least we're not mucking about anymore. At least, you know, we're not sort of being delicate about it. Some behavioural approaches use money. There may just be occasions when that, as a first step, may be appropriate in my book, but it's going to be highly contentious. But so you've got, if you like, material, tangible things over here, rewards. And then you've got activities like helping people do things. Then you've got symbolic things like ticks and charts and star charts and all the rest of it. Then you've got social things, which is what you were doing, genuine social communication as a reward. And at the far end, you've got intrinsic. And where any behavioural approach worth its salt has got to get to is when kids are saying, I like being in here, I like doing this work, I like being with this person, I like these other people in the classroom, this is a good place to be, I feel positive and I feel energetic. Now that's where you've got to get to. And even if it stops at the social, where the teacher is always saying, well done, I'm really pleased with you, it's not gone far enough if it hasn't got to the intrinsic. And there are people who will argue that you could start right down the far end with perhaps some really tough kids, even with money, and work their way up and so until things were intrinsically motivating. But you've got to make the journey. You can't stop at the material, or you can't stop at those ticks on boards or star charts, and you can't even stop at the social when it always depends on the nice person saying, I'm pleased with you. You've got to have a plan, a strategy, and you've got to be guided towards that final bit when being here, doing these things is great fun and energising for the person involved.
I know we're highlighting behaviour management at the moment because that's what we're talking about. But it is one of the tools. It's not the be-all and end-all. And I don't just look at that in order to get academic achievement. I want to educate the whole child for life to fit and meet head-on everything that life throws at the child.
And I think it's interesting because you hinted there that, in a sense, there is a degree of setup here that we've been invited to talk about behaviour, and some of us, certainly myself, have a strong reluctance talking about behaviour as if it's separate from teaching and learning. When I notice where schools are really developing their work around behavioural approaches, there tends to be a separating out of behaviour. We need to get behaviour sorted because then we can teach them. And then the kids can learn. So there's this notion we need to separate out the behaviour, deal with it, so we get on with the real thing about teaching and learning. And I think that there's something unhelpful in that. Learning can take place as a result of thinking and reflecting explicitly about behaviour, that it doesn't need to be separated out.
The bottom line of it is, I am a head teacher. I am in charge of an educational institution, and therefore my job is to get the children learning to the highest academic standards as possible. I'm not a social worker. I'm not a counsellor. I'm not all of these things. But I am.
And there's another aspect.
And it's that last piece, Eileen, which is saying...
You can't come away from that.
No.
You're also responsible for a group of teachers.
I was going to come on
and
to
they
that.
are different people. They start from different places. And it's not a criticism, but Nikki, but that's the challenge for you, I think, having your group of teachers, some of whom I suspect, will gravitate towards TA and be utterly embroiled in it themselves personally, and therefore, work with the kids fantastically, and others with reservations for all sorts of their own reasons.
Don't you get that, though, in any school with any approach?
Yes.
That you've come across where you see a day done on assertive discipline and you've got a load at the back saying no one's going to tell me whether or not I praise that kid for sitting down quietly, I'm going to do my own thing. And I think the approaches that schools develop tell us as much, if not more, about the grown-ups in the place.
Absolutely.
And what they believe about education, what they believe about the role of the teacher, than it does about the individual stories of children in difficulty or not, as the case may be.
But then, you're talking about leadership. You're talking about getting people on board and saying, hey, this isn't working. If we tried this, I'm sure these are the benefits. So it's about the leader managing change for the benefit of those teachers so that they can do whatever it is they have to do.